Welcome to Shyzalosophy. Here's your host, Shyzabox. Oh yeah, whoa girl, whoa girl, get out of here. And the horse you rode in on. Apprentice, excellent job with the job you have to do. Hang tight, you're not dismissed yet. We have to figure out stuff. Excellent. We figured out stuff. Get out of here, apprentice. Jeez. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome one, welcome all. Literally one, welcome all. We've got a continuation today of a topic that is near and dear to whoever's heart it's near and dear to, but that's beside the point. That's a fast horse. You know what, Josh? It absolutely is a fast horse, but that's also a pretty fast comment. You're pretty quick on the draw there. Slow down, cowboy. We haven't even gotten to the intro yet, and you're already running the show. Josh, that's a good thing. You know, we ever tell you, Josh, our intros aren't that good, right? So, the minute that you have your, let's say, input, it really helps us out. Not only can we focus on that for a minute, but it makes us not have to do any real work. You see, Josh, can we call it Josh? Of course we can. Josh, J-Money. When management tells us to do an episode on something, usually we have to do it, right? Now, that could entail anything from doing actual research or finding an exact topic, something like that, right? But in the case of this episode, which is a continuation of a topic that Danny made us do, and no one else voted. They said do an episode about aliens, and no one else had anything to say about it. You know why that was? No one else was watching. So, that's your own fault. If you wanted an episode not about aliens, which is such a broad topic that we have to make it a multi-parter, way to go. So, that's what you get. Needless to say, as we were sitting there thinking to ourselves, there's many ways to approach aliens, things of that nature, right? And as we broke it down in the part one, we didn't see it. Don't blame you. But as we broke it down, the term alien, advanced civilizations from past, a star people, gods, goddesses, there's so many different ways you can approach the conversation. When someone says, do an episode about aliens, you can start from virtually everywhere or anywhere. That's multiple places, okay? And as we stated in part one, and we will reiterate here because it is that important, there are aspects of philosophy, of conversation, that people are inherently so closed-minded to the debate thereof. When you have religious affiliates and things of that nature that are very, very set in their beliefs and ways and are not open-minded to an alternative way of thinking that challenges maybe their beliefs that they were raised with, right? Then conversation shuts down and ceases to be. Our job then, as philosophers, right? Believe you me, we got our minor in philosophy when we got our college degree. And that thing was worth so much to us that, lo and behold, we fell back on our minor, which is this. All conjecture. Welcome to philosophy. In this case, Shyzalosophy. It's a modern philosophy, okay? It's not centered around being rooted in fact. It's centered around being rooted in conversation, of thinking the unthinkable, of mentioning the unmentionable. Except the unmentionables that are unmentionable. We don't want to get ourselves in any more trouble. The feds seem to take everything we say with not a grain of salt. And so, every time we say, hey, Fed boy, they seem to not like it. So anyhow, the point is that everything can be centered around a discussion, okay, rather than a fact. And to top it all off, believe it or not, the budget around here isn't quite like the Joe of the Rogan or the Tim of the Pool. No fact checkers here, though. Danny did volunteer. Now, let's catch up with the chat that's coming in. Hopefully we prefaced enough to make it a legal type disclaimer to where it's not necessarily entertainment, but it's not factual or true. Though it might not be rooted in facts, it can be based on the conjecture of what those facts entail and where those facts line up or don't line up. So, is it entertainment? Sure, derived as you see what entertainment is. Is it philosophy? Well, absolutely. In fact, it's a new branch of philosophy, okay? You can look at all the past philosophers, Aristotle, Plato, Frederica the Nietzsche, the same ones we mentioned earlier. Those three specifically, because any time that you talk to anyone about philosophy, well, lo and behold, those are the only three that are ever mentioned, okay? Usually. Sometimes some other ones. Some people venture out and, might even scratch the surface of some modern philosophers that are out there, believe it or not, that have works that get published, okay? Let's go into the box of what other people want to say that is more important than what we have to say. It's not like it's our show or anything. Grab the camera for a Lamar act. Colton, I don't know if you're the same individual that's wanted us to Lamar of the Jackson edit for multiple of the times, but, if there's one thing we know we've gotten in trouble for before, it's doing a bunch of random grabbing of people, okay? Now, we're not saying Lamar Jackson doesn't love to be grabbed at, okay? All celebrities do, us included, okay? You might be saying, what celebrity are you? Well, we're the best of the worst celebrities, obviously. We are, in essence, the worst celebrity, okay? Now, we call dibs on that ground floor level, okay? That's how it has to work. Everything you watch is guaranteed to be better than this, okay? But there has to be a ground floor level somewhere, and we call dibs. That's us. So, you want to Lamar of the Jackson edit? Well, we don't know why, but sure. Lamar of the Jackson edit away. How do you grab the camera thing? Probably like this. You probably from underneath, correct? You're right. You just need to support the bottom of the camera. Lamar Jackson. There you go. Well, we like to think that we do things efficiently, and most likely that's going to be very easy to work with footage-wise. So you're welcome. Excellent. Hi and hello. You're an alien from the planet Zorpo. Well, Josh, that's great. We always kind of knew you were an alien from the planet Zorpo, but we didn't want to make any assumptions and blow your cover, okay? So we know a lot of you aliens and modern ancient civilization graduates to this point in time in history find yourselves at, odds with perhaps the direction humanity has been going, okay? So, if you Zorponians would have chimed in kind of at the early 2000s a little sooner than now, would have been a lot better for everyone. So, we're not saying we blame the planet Zorpo for all the problems, Josh, but, it's not like you guys haven't been around and had the tech that you could have really lent a hand, okay? Really got your fingers or, your tentacles. Whatever, Josh, I'm not going to assume how your disguise works. But if there's one thing that we do know, it's that South Park probably had a fairly accurate portrayal of Earth, right? Now, if you haven't seen South Park, Josh, and we don't blame you, you are from Zorpo, after all. Oh, so you claim. I mean, we haven't seen your passport or anything, but we're guessing that you're not lying, because Zorponians don't lie. And that's one thing that's very well known. Obviously, as a Zorponian, you would know that. So, we don't take you as a liar, Josh, but there's one thing we're not really familiar with. It's more of stuff about Zorpo. So, we're going to have to keep this kind of centered relatively in Earth's atmosphere, okay? And we will address the topics therein and kind of keep it along the more lines of logical reasoning and argumentation, okay? Now, we can have fun, Josh. We sure can. We can discuss how Zorponians may or may not have existed and or been one of the ancient civilizations that were responsible for cities like Göbekli Tepe. Okay, Josh? But the thing is, and Josh, we can call you Josh, right? Okay, all right, so J-Money. The thing is that Göbekli Tepe, as we stated earlier, in episode 1, okay, we'll call it episode 1, multi-part series because it's an open-ended discussion. Göbekli Tepe single-handedly puts all of the, historical timeline of humanity on its head. Okay? When you find giant civilizations that are older than things like Stonehenge, which was presumed to be one of the oldest, you got some issues and some timeline problems that rear their faces into, intelligent thought and conversation around that. Okay? But, as we stated earlier as well, Josh, can we call you Josh? Of course. So, as we stated earlier, there's some individuals that are very against their life work being undone at the end of their lives. If someone dedicates 30, 40, 50 years researching, studying, trying to prove a fact, a theory, something like that, and something like Göbekli Tepe comes along and makes them look not as smart as we thought they were, they don't want to support anything like that. They want to go out on top. They want their findings, their studies to be whatever. Hence, you look at maybe perhaps the reasoning why the excavation of said Göbekli Tepe is, not so much on the forefront of them wanting to. So, how it goes, Zorponians well. Well, of course we do, Josh. That's our job. As internet celebrities, even bad ones, okay? The worst of the, all of them. That's us. We know our place, Josh. And it's our job to know the hard-hitting facts and truths that present themselves to, all of the masses, okay? Now, you have your better celebrities out there, okay? Everyone but us, okay? But the thing about being on the ground floor level, Josh, is we're still a celebrity, okay? So we get the perks and accolades that come with it. In our case, they are not a lot, but, we get them. Because we call dibs, Josh. That's how it works. Daryl Dixon taught us that in Walking Dead. So, dibs on being the best, worst celebrity. We get the accolades that come with it. Anyhow, let's see this. It's my birthday today. Can you hang me a birthday? Hugh Jass. Well, ho, 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 everyone, it's Hugh Jass's birthday. Well, Hugh Jass, you must have known that we were celebrating birthdays the other day. And believe you me, we were. We even had a birthday cake for Lily and Dani. Rick stuck his fingers all over it. Now, you might not believe us, but he did. Now, we happen to have that cake right here in-house, okay? Now, this cake began to mold because we had this party a couple days ago, but in the interest of the entertainment aspect of not focusing on the philosophical aspect of tonight, we present to you the leftover Dani cake that Lily was no longer allowed to be on, that Rick stuck his fingers in. It's back here. Now, you might be saying, I can't see that. And fair enough, but we do have a cake. It was Dani's and Lily's. Lily, she left the party after we sang to her. Can't blame her. She had better stuff to do and better people to hang out with. Lo and behold, Rick put his fingers all over the cake. Now you can't see the candles because we hung a rainbow for your enjoyment. So, we kind of celebrated birthdays the other night. How about this? How about we'll pretend that stream, we celebrated your birthday as well. So, all you have to do is, go click on that video, watch it, and then substitute Lily's name with yours. So instead of Lily, put in Hugh jazz. Okay? Perfect. Now we get an extra view, and you feel like you were treated very specially by, getting your shout out. Now remember, we'll call you Lily, but that's okay. Don't worry about it. You know your name's Hugh. We know your name's Hugh. Okay? Obviously, you wouldn't lie to us. Okay? Unless you're not a Zorponian like Josh. Okay? But that's beside the point. It's not like you were trying to get us to say something like clever or funny or anything like that. Because we know you wouldn't do that to us. We're new at this. And even though we're celebrities already, which we are, you wouldn't do that to us. That's just not nice. But anyhow, yeah, go check out that other one. Give us the view and, just pretend your name's Lily for a minute. Or your nickname. But sub it out with yours. Excellent. So, on Zorpo See a Rainbow, we have to sacrifice the elderly. Well, of course you do, Josh. Why do you think we posted it? We know that this is broadcast and picked up in Zorpo, and we were kind of hoping that you guys would make some room for humanity. So, if I kind of got the party started a little early, maybe you guys could clear out a continent or two and help us get our asses over there. Because, if we're being honest, there's some stuff that seems like it's gone pretty far south around here. So, you guys should make way to let us go mess up your planet instead. Thanks. Anyhow, we're talking Shyzalosophy. We're talking philosophy. You can talk aliens from any, point in reference to the unknown. Earlier, we started off talking about it from a religious perspective and making known that if someone's so set in their ways that they're unopen to even a conversation about different aspects of what could be, okay, whether it's conjecture, whether it's hypothetical, whether it's a very unlikely, okay, no matter where it falls on the spectrum, as long as there's the, opportunity to talk about it, that's what kind of matters, okay, no matter how far-fetched something may be, how ridiculous of a take, how crazy of a conjecture it could possibly be, somewhere in there is rooted an aspect of what could be. Somewhere in there has to be an aspect of a mode of application in a practical medium for it to fall into a new mode of thinking, a new way of thinking, and or change the way of something else that has been being thought of. So when you are able to find someone who might very well be headstrong in their religious, knowledge and things of that nature, who are open-minded to conversation and debate, it's very refreshing to finally be able to get to a point where you can come up with some conjecture, come up with some, unlogical ways of logical thinking, okay? Stuff that is probably not true, maybe not rooted in fact, but stuff that very well could be, rooted in just being, okay? Somewhere in there, there'd be some logic and argumentation and reasoning. So, there's lots of aspects of it, that thing, President of Zorpo henceforth. Well, Josh, we always knew you guys were poor pushovers over there, and it was just a matter of time before we conquered your weak little planet. Now, we're not saying you're weaklings, Josh. We know this. You know this. But, as the president of Zorpo, which, we knew we would eventually be, because our tactics are fairly brilliant. Because we're brilliant, Josh. Might not seem like it, but how do you think we got to the point we are today? By investing in a college degree? Yes. Minoring in philosophy? Absolutely. And falling back on that minor to start a new branch of philosophy because it's all opinionated anyway. Absolutely. Well, fantastic. As president of Zorpo, I hereby henceforth commence. Everyone should look at that rainbow and make room for a couple continents of Earth coming over. Because now it's Merca Zorpo. Because that's just how it works, Josh. You just handed over your entire planet. I hereby give it to the U.S. government in lieu of ever paying taxes again. Excellent. Damn it. Hold on. I already wasn't doing that. I give it to them in lieu of, I don't know, something to be held and given to me at my leisure whenever I demand it. That's beside the point, Josh. You're kind of throwing us off. We're trying to keep it a little more centered and focused. But thanks for giving us your entire planet. I gave it away already. You know, I quit. You made me president and I let you all down. And I understand that. I'm used to it. That's okay. A lot of old art on your planet depicts our spacecraft. Well, the good thing about that, Josh, is that's probably entirely true. If that's you in those old depictions of, the paintings with, what is it, the Virgin Mary with the baby Jesus and stuff in it, and then flying spacecraft in the background, and or hieroglyphics with alien-like ships and things of that nature, that you, that Zorpo. In that case, I take it back from the U.S. government. Sorry, U.S. government, but, you know, the Zorponians really don't want your fingers jacking up that shit, too. So, you're welcome, Josh. I took the planet back pretty fast. Because there's a little thing called being able to return shit in 5 days. And I retook the shit. You know, that's just how it works. Government does it all the time. They pretend to give you rights, then they take them away. Because you're not allowed to have them, Josh. You know why? Because they know better. So, let them know your rights. Don't worry about it. Just kidding, Josh. You should know your rights. As a Zorponian, maybe you don't have as many as, you know, some other folks, but you should probably. So, be sure you push for those. Anyhow, let's check in. What do we got here? We have the talk of a blanketed aliens, right? And the approach of anywhere in a timeline or a point of history. So, let's look at it from the ancient civilization aspect, right? Could you argue that in ancient civilizations, in this case, the not hypothetical Zorpos, right, Josh? Coming to this planet due to exploration, due to necessity, due to a complete and utter accident, okay? Maybe they were fleeing destruction. Maybe they were fleeing war in another galaxy, traversed the stars for a millennia, and generations upon generations later, landed on Earth, okay, conjecture, Shyzalosophy, and because there was virtually nothing here when they got here, maybe terraformed it a little bit, added a little here, a little there, played with some DNA here, some DNA there, introduced new species, foods, animals, here and there, okay? Now, did it happen that way? No. Maybe. Maybe not. Zorponians would maybe agree and say, yep, that's exactly how it happened. Religious, you know, scholars would say no. God created it. He is ordained, so it is so. Okay? It depends on where you want to take the conversation and what part you want to argue, okay? As long as there's open discussion, you can draw infinite conclusions to what is unfactually able to be substantiated in one's lifetime by the whole human existence's knowledge compiled with the computing technology of the best AI. Eventually, answers become conjecture. They become unfounded and unrooted in fact. There's aspects of arguments that can be had that, when not shut down by hitting a brick wall due to belief or reservations about venturing into the unknown or the crazy, right? There's elements that can be looked at surrounding the entire topic that branch in infinite directions. There are so many ways to approach it. You need to be pointed, you need to be specific, and it's a multi-parted, multi-issued, multi-approachable, from all sorts of aspects and directions, conversation. It's open-ended. It's never-ending. There's always more conjecture to be had that's unrooted in fact, that's unfounded in belief, okay? You can pull stuff from almost anywhere and have someone disagree with it. I don't believe that source. I don't know where that came from. I haven't read that. I'm just too stubborn, okay? Whatever the reason is, whatever the conversation is to be had, as long as that conversation takes place, that's Shyzalosophy. So, where to start? It's such a big piece of the pie. We scraped across a little religion, but we haven't ventured to talk about all of the religious aspects of philosophy. It can't be done in one episode, so it lies within the realm then of how the show, how the conversation, how Shyzalosophy pertaining to the conversation of aliens and what you deem or perceive aliens to be. Okay, star people, lizard people that dwell under the ground, ancient civilizations that have been lost through the tests of time, and descendants re-emerged decades and decades later after cataclysmic events or super huge, massive world warfare. Okay? Massive, meteorites that come. Okay? You have elements of science that can look at all of these points in time, these points in history, and make their hypothesis and conjectures, okay, and support them and root them in fact. Take a core sample, carbon date something, know how old it is, sure. But the conversation changes when you realize that what you've been told, what you've known to be true, is completely false, is completely wrong, at least in the order that it is, at least in knowing where it lies on the timeline, okay? Even if all recorded history is correct and accurate, which it is not, even if it were to be, it is very much so up on its head. The minute that you throw in the Göbekli Tepe argument, man, it changes the timeline. It changes the entire dynamic. And with it being unearthed, it changes what the conjecture around ancient civilizations can be. Josh, you say there's art depicting spacecraft, okay, that can be found, and you tie it to Zorpo. Say it is Zorpo, okay? Say that Nibiru, okay, which some people believe exists, some people believe doesn't exist. It's a close sister planet. It's a planet that only comes around every so often. So you got Nibiru, planet X, okay, out there, hypothetically. And you have Zorpo, right? Well, say they're the same planet. And you know that to be true, Josh. Of course you do. They're the same planet, okay? And there is the argument around, say, did this civilization travel to Earth? Did they bring anything with them? Is Josh right in saying that there's art that is specifically depicting ancient civilizations flying spacecraft and or craft, mode of transportations or vehicles of other advanced civilizations that maybe were already present on the Earth? Maybe they were already sitting there. So yes, we have seen the conjecture surrounding the art, okay, that is perceived to be flying spacecraft, astronauts with helmets and breathing apparatuses and things of that nature. All right, we've seen them. We've watched the Ancient of the Aliens and things of that nature and been acquainted with the you know, controversies and the hypotheses and the, conjecture and everything like that pertaining to ancient aliens, things of that nature, okay, and the thought thereof. You have entire groups that devote time to studying UFOlogy and things like that, to studying radar, to transmitting and receiving signals to and from space, trying to contact extraterrestrials, another form of life, looking to get pings back, right? There's people that dedicate entire segments of their lives to trying to track this stuff down, to find out about it, to see how it could or could not influence, the remaining part of their lives and where they want to devote their course of study and learning and, free time to, right? Make it into a career. Any element or aspect of it that they deem worthy to pursue academically or knowledge-wise, that's what they're going to do. And as long as they're open-minded to it, maybe they'll have people challenge their beliefs and shape them even further, push them to the next limit, okay? Make them begin to challenge even further than that. Make it into a reality, an existence. Form collectives and groups. Just kidding, feds, or not. That would then work forward to formulating more hypotheses, more things of that nature, more groups that could come together and be that next civilization that ventures into the stars. They're talking about Mars by 2029, something like that. Want to go there, right? Pretty lofty goals. They seem pretty confident in it. So it's going to inherently rely upon the collective group around it that is formed, right? That's going to get the job done, or not. Maybe they won't meet their deadlines or their goals, okay? But with that, at least they're trying, venturing, going forth. So, something to think about. But that's just how it goes. We need our go juice, Josh. That's the thing. Aliens, right? Science and technology. Let's go to the 50s, Roswell. We're going all over the place. There's no right way, no wrong way. Got Roswell, New Mexico, right? Everyone hears the UFO crash. Everyone says UFOs have crashed all over the place. News articles, newspapers, sightings, things like that. From, 100 years ago, 1903, 1904, 1905, you'll find articles, right? UFO sightings, UFO crashes. Big one, 40s, 50s, right? The Battle of L.A., Battle of Los Angeles, okay? Off the coast. Navy fought some flying crafts, things of that nature. Crazy stuff. Those fighting weather balloons are insane. There's recorded elements of history that paint a very pointed finger or arrow at there's probably some truth to it. And then there's people who want there to be no truth to it, that want the conversation to be shut down, that want there to be no conversation to take place, and want to delay any conversation about a conversation taking place for years to come. Like we said before, in, the first episode on it, we reference them all the time because their content is extremely good. You have bright insight that sheds light on all the elements and aspects of Göbekli Tepe that we find to be the most interesting, the most relevant, and the most up-to-date. There's not a lot of entities that cover it. There's not a lot of media that covers it. There's not a lot of, people who take it upon themselves to go there to try and see it for themselves, okay? It's quite the venture to undertake. It's doable, but it's quite the venture, okay? A lot of elements have to line up and come together. when you check out the content, when you see the reasoning and the logic behind not excavating, behind delaying excavation, behind not welcoming, future aspects of it to be unearthed for 150 years, to doing things as ridiculous as planting olive trees over the entire ancient civilization, which is known to damage things by the roots going down. The absurdness in the decision making points even more arrows, points even more fingers towards there's probably some logic in the entire usurping of humans' recorded history based off this one site alone. And from what we understand, there's another site within travel distance of it that's just as old, if not older. Okay? So when you contradict the timeline, and you got folks that, refuse to accept it, the conversation gets shut down. So then it takes place here. That's unfortunate. Because until there's that bridging and that, gap that is met, okay, by outstretched hands on both sides, there's never going to be the push forward on getting this shit dealt with, okay? If you have religious folks that are against changing anything that will make it very hard for their religion, and you have political folks that, with the revealing of technology or information or maybe claims to certain areas of lands or resources or things of that nature, okay, if it throws people out of power, throws them on their head, you think they want you to excavate that site so that, the people learn that they had a free form of energy or something like that, okay, just hypothetically, that they had some sort of tech that survived thousands and thousands and thousands of years and for some reason still works and changes everything, or another version or iteration of it that they already have access to, okay, conjecture, that the general populace isn't allowed to have access to, okay? What governments would ever hide stuff from people, right? None of them, obviously. They're all very open with the public and everything like that. We're evolving. We could very well look like aliens in the future. That's right. Maybe the aliens of the future are the humans of the past. Or vice versa. Could be either one, Josh, really. Could be either one. When you have elements of a living species, okay, that needs to be met, then obviously they'll have to change elements of how they do their living to meet those needs. Okay? Say there is a race of reptilians. Say they come from a planet that was perfect distance from the sun and they were able to do their lizard people things wherever. Okay? Then those scaly bastards were like, hey, look, there's Earth. Let's hop over there. And they did. It was a little more cold in areas and such, and they couldn't really tolerate the surface, and they thought they could. They went underground. Maybe they just live underground. Crab people, right? In this case, lizard people. But it could be on either end of the spectrum, and it all comes down to conjecture, and it all comes down to where you want to focus the conversation, which is open-ended, could be talked about in any way, shape, or form, and could take the form of any aspect of a timeline or a area of study or expertise. Okay, and there's the philosophy of everything. So if you want to challenge the ancient civilization history and look at the philosophy of ancient civilizations, okay, then it depends on where you kind of want to start. A lot of times people start Egypt, pharaohs, tombs, things of that nature, okay? You might go back a little further. to that kind of point in time, that period in history, right? You might venture to move it a couple years down the road, or maybe you want to hit the gods and the goddesses of Greek and Rome. Okay, your Apollo, your Athens, Athena, okay, your Jupiter, your Ares, your Neptune. Okay, it doesn't matter where you want to go. There's elements of the philosophy, especially around that latter point in time, when you have your Plutos, your Aristotles, and things of that nature and such, making their faces and their, thoughts and opinions, and pushing that, thought pattern and process that drove society into a philosophical point of view and approach to law, to religion, to science, to technology. Okay? The philosophy of is out there for everything. We know. We minored in it and had to take a shit ton of classes. Believe you me, we paid for every single one of them. Time and money. And more money for books. And more time for writing papers and reading those books. We didn't read every book, we'll be honest. We only minored in philosophy. So, take that for what it is. Means that what we say isn't inherently correct or right. But it's not rooted in fact. It's rooted in conversation. Okay? We can feel free to conjecture and conversate about where lizard people would have came from if lizard people were here. We can conversate about if lizard people are here and where they came from. We could conversate about different takes on how the world started. Okay, from religious perspectives, from passed down word of mouth recorded history. We can talk about the philosophy of why there's a lot of the same stories from cultures that were divided by great expanses of not only distance but obstacles as well. Oceans, mountains, rivers, lakes, streams, valleys, canyons, icebergs. But they have stories that correlate in many ways, elements and degrees. You can look at the Pentateuch and the first 5 books of the Bible, okay? You look at Genesis and Numbers and this, that, and the other, okay? And you go through and notice that the elements that they talk about, they mention things that people don't talk about. In the first 5 books in there, okay, the Pentateuch, which is in the Torah, from what we understand as well. Haven't read it, but we understand that those 5 books are in there as well. You have conversations and talks about things like Nephilim and giants and this, that, the other, right? You have popular pop culture stories of the Marines that fought the giants in the caves of Afghanistan. Big red-headed giants with 6 fingers that throw spears, big red beards, okay? Smelly, stinky. Took helicopters to lift out, okay? There's stories of it. Are they real? Don't know. We weren't there. We didn't fight a big giant. Wasn't us. Stories are out there. So you shut it down because there's no way to prove it, because you don't trust the sources that came out about it, because it could be fake, or do you entertain the idea that there very well could have been an encounter in one way, shape, or form with an entity, okay, maybe derived from a alternative civilization or culture or, species that has lived in seclusion somehow, some way, some shape, some form, okay, that somehow a group of Marines got into a conflict and a battle with, okay? The stories are out there about it. They might not be true. They might just be all for entertainment, for clickbait, for views, but the conversation can be had about it, and it should be able to be had about it, to further the discussion of how and why it could, and not shut it down immediately as this contradicts everything that we've been taught and told from the, beginning of history, which, as we've already stated, is obviously blatantly false and a lie, because it's been put on its head by the knowing of things like Göbekli Tepe, okay? Flips it on its head, rewrites the entire thing. If you travel at the speed of light, you would be traveling at a different speed of time. So aliens would technically be time travelers. Yeah, exactly. So, Josh, it's a very good point. Very good point. Sorry. Time definitely has its place, okay? And all of the equations and mathematical workings, okay? From Einstein to, whoever else did workings with it, okay? We're not scientists. But there is a philosophy of science. And the philosophy of science is that the stuff that can be proven, and reproven, all right, let's base that in fact. But the stuff that is unknown, is unable to be tested, is unable to be proven, let's not necessarily omit it. Let's not necessarily shut down the conversation around it. Let's not necessarily write it off as a, little subtype of absurdness and absurdity, okay? If you give it its just due as a piece of information, okay, whether it's true or not, as a point of conversation, then you can focus in on how it cannot be absurd. How maybe it's plausible for other aspects and components of it to drive something beneficial to the argument or to the conversation that ends up not just being ridiculous absurdity that it's written off to be to begin with. Okay? It comes full circle, and as long as the conversation is open enough and willing to be had, then it very well could rear its head and make something fruitful out of itself. But if you shut it down immediately, you don't have it, you write it off, and it never takes place, that's not going to happen. So from a philosophical perspective, okay, whilst surely there are scientists that are at odds with each other on what they believe, on what they want to pursue as far as components of a area of study or, different, tests and hypotheses that they want to generate, run, and do. No matter how you look at it, the entities exist out there to where any aspect, as long as it's open-minded enough to be discussed, can find some validity in it, all right, and you can tie it in. You can prove your argument, you can argue your argument. Might not be a good one, might not end up being true in any way, shape, or form, but if it drives the conversation, ties into another component or another argument somewhere else, at least that's a conversation that's been had. Those are points of contention that may have been discussed or pointed out or conversed about, and it can really lend to the overall betterment of the conversation in general. So, how it goes. Book of Enoch, tell you about Nephilim. So, Goliath is probably a Nephilim. Yeah, absolutely. So, we've actually read the Book of Enoch. That's a funny thing you say that, Josh. We actually, it's one of our favorite reads. My favorite reads. Yeah, we read it. Actually, at least, believe it or not, Josh, yeah. We read the Book of Enoch, okay? Only, we didn't read the whole Book of Enoch. Turns out, there's like 3 or 5 books of Enoch, okay? We read book 3, the fucking math one, right? Turns out that that one is a little harder to read. But we didn't know the other books of Enoch existed because, you see, it's like we've been lied to. Now, we didn't even know there was a Ethiopian Bible. Wow. Lo and behold, guess what's in that one, Josh? That's right, you probably already know. Of course you know. Yours are Podium. The Book of Enoch. That's in the Ethiopian Bible. Okay? Been in there forever. It's a Bible that has more and more to it. Now, we wanted to know, because we've studied the philosophy of religion. Okay, Josh? We wanted to know why the Book of Enoch was excluded from the Bible. Okay, well, the New American Bible. the St. Joseph version of the Bible, King James version of the Bible, okay? Any of the more westernized Bibles, okay? The Book of Enoch was taken out when they did that, Council of Nicaea, or whatever, that one city, because technically it was viewed as non-canonical, okay? And so because it, was kind of that, wasn't really viewed as being prophetic. Now, we don't want to venture to say stuff that is factually incorrect and true around it. There are entities and sources that know way more about this stuff than us, okay? Individuals out there, and we'll point you towards folks like Wes Huff. He knows his Bible, he knows his stuff, okay? Way better than we do. But when it comes to where knowing the Book of Enoch was excluded from, okay, because we've looked into that, and trying to find the reasoning why, all right, it came down to, how it was, just kind of viewed as one of those books that, should be omitted. Now, you look at, further than that, forget the Book of Enoch. Look at how meaningful Enoch was as a person, okay? Enoch is referenced in the Bible itself, Book of Enoch aside, in whichever version you read. If you're reading the Ethiopian Bible, it's in there. If not, you track it down on your own, read it by itself, which we did. Part 3, we thought we were reading the whole thing. Turns out there's like 3 or 5 parts or whatever. But we read the math one with the orbits of the moon and the sun, technically. That's what we think we're reading, and like how they were, it starts here, it ends there, it goes through here, it ends there, okay, whatever. From what we deduced from it, I mean, crazy read, right? Especially all the math stuff, okay? Just like reading the Book of Numbers in the Pentateuch. It's, sure, this army was this big and they had this much. Now, we were history majors, sure, but when you're talking about their censuses that they took and they reiterated over and over for, 12 tribes plus technically 13 because the ones were, the priest tribe or whatever. That, whatever. Okay? There's so many aspects of it that, tie in. Westhoff knows his shit. We like watching him, talk to individuals and stuff like that because he's very intelligent, okay? There's better places to get sources and things like that than, ourselves. So take this for Shyzalosophy, not rooted in necessarily fact. We don't have the budget of the Joe of the Rogan, the Tim of the Pool. There are no fact of the checkers here, okay? And it looks like Dani took the night off. They had volunteered to be fact checker, but it's a volunteer position, so we tried to fire them, and they rehired themselves. And we were all right with that, because we're lazy and didn't care. But the point is that, yes, the Book of Enoch's fascinating, and forget the Book of Enoch. Look at Enoch as a person, okay? Enoch as a person, mentioned in the Bible or whatever, is the only individual, aside from Jesus, okay? And probably that. We don't want to say the only one, we could be missing something. That went up with God, okay, in human 3D, this reality form, to go kick it, right? And his descriptions, and of course, we say we haven't read the Book of Enoch. Well, we have and haven't, because, a bit more of a Book of Enoch than we thought, so we had read a portion of it. We did go back and unconfirmedly, because we didn't have the copy, we didn't have a downloaded copy or anything, we listened to the Book of Enoch being read by the computer-generated thing, and they had the text on there, and you could follow along, but we can't verify it was the actual Book of Enoch, okay? But yes, all of the talk of the Nephilim, the talk of the 7 different realms of heaven, in essence, like that, the different gateways or doorways you could go through on it. Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. We love the study of the philosophy of religion. We love the study of all components of religion, down to and including the correlation between the stories of things like great floods happening across cultures and religious affiliations worldwide that account for the same type of disaster, the same type of catastrophe, all right, the same type of elements to the story, all rooted in completely separate geographical locations within the confines of completely separate cultures, and they all correlate in a weird degree of correlation. Fascinating stuff. You really know your stuff. Well, you would like to think we know our stuff, but we don't, or we do. We like to think we do. Like we said, we love the study of religion, man. Like, if there's one thing that we would love to do, it's continue to study it. It's fascinating. We love all of the, components and aspects of different philosophies of religion, okay? You have things like the Mahabharata, okay, and our accent's going to be horrible, but, elements of these books and these texts and these verbalized, passed down oral histories in places like India that have been going on for thousands and thousands of years. You have religions like Buddhism that just have the most beautiful overview of different things, okay, whether you believe it or not. What a great, beautiful overlay of how they view things, how they perceive, how they, do their worship in their own way. Fascinating, okay? We love the study of not fake stuff. And when you get into the realm of potential ancient technologies, ancient humanity, okay, ancient aliens, reptilians, anything like that, all of the unfathomable, all the conjecture, all of the that's crazy stuff, put on your tinfoil hat, all of the elements of that is stuff that can not necessarily be disproven, that is just inherently shut down conversationally as that dude's crazy, or that lady's crazy, or they're dumb for even thinking such a thing, right? Well, look at all the dumb stuff that ended up not being that dumb after all. When you have cities that are older than what is taught in school as the starting point of recorded human history, and you have entire cities that are thousands of years older than that, well, maybe you should stop fucking teaching the wrong shit. It'll never get better, it'll never advance if these entities that keep regurgitating the same incorrect stuff that has well been changed as far as we're concerned, with the amount of knowledge that we've gained from just watching channels like Bright Insight, or even the History Channel's take on ancient aliens. When you learn of stuff like Puma Punka, or whatever it's called, or, the plains in Peru that are completely iced off top, you look at petrification processes and, giants and Nephilim, absolutely, and you got elements of even mammoths and giant sloths. When we first learned about giant sloths, these bastards are crazy. You're telling me that there's a sloth animal, okay, giant sloth, that early humans, early Neanderthal, early caveman, early whatever, used to go around and hunt, and these bastards were huge. Look up a picture. Show us one. No, that's work. We're not doing that. Go find one yourself. Giant sloths. Crazy. They're massive. You see them on display in natural history museums, things of that nature. Giant sloths, giant Nephilim, giant petrified forests. Look at the redwood forest, man. From what we hear, haven't been there, pretty massive. Or if we have been there, we don't remember. We're probably real little. We've been to California, tried to get the hell out really fast. Whew, thank God we did. But point is that you have all elements of stuff that was giant. So yes, Nephilim and Goliath being one. Okay, absolutely. Why not? Okay, it's talked about in the Bible in multiple places. And sorry we got off of Enoch. He's talked about multiple places. But there's always just brief little mentions. Okay, like I want to say even in like the book of Isaiah, I think they even say like, and Enoch went and walked with God. Okay, Yeah, the only one that really got that privilege and really got that, hey, check all this stuff out, right? It's almost like if you ever saw that movie Battlefield Earth, okay? Science fiction movie, fantastic. Jonathan Travolta's in it, okay? You might be saying that movie sucks because it got horrible reviews when it came out. We'll tell you why. Because, holy shit, this artistic director, okay? We don't remember who directed it. Who cares? Doesn't matter. Battlefield Earth, John Travolta, right? And other people. Got such bad reviews because the director took the biggest risk that we've seen in modern cinematography history, at least in the realms of the last probably 20 years. We're not even joking, okay? Now, you've had really good directors. You've had really good movies that have come out. You've had really good stuff that has broken the mold on what was, good or awesome or cool to see. But we don't even know his name. We probably should. The director of Battlefield Earth, or, that's probably one with John Travolta, took the biggest risk of all in portraying the camera angle and shot of the alien race that has enslaved humanity to get them to mine for gold. They used the shot of them seeing stuff in a crooked angle. So the entire movie almost, it's like you're watching it at an angle, right? Like the camera tripod fell during shooting and they're like, well, Bob's off today. He's not going to give us a hand fixing that, so fuck it, just leave it. High five, Bob. Way to go. So, they filmed the entire thing, and as a moviegoer, as a watcher, you don't really get it, and it's not until only after you do a little research, hear an interview or two, and come to the realization that they showed it crooked, not because the tripod broke, but as an artistic portrayal of how this alien species, okay, that enslaved humanity, functioned and saw things from their perspective. Kind of crooked, okay? So it's fantastic in hindsight, but it got a very bad rap, very bad reviews, and people did not appreciate seeing the entire movie like this, right? So whilst we enjoyed the movie ourselves, it never gained the notoriety that it should have, even with John Travolta in it. Got a bad rap, all because the director took a chance to, rather than deliver a story, to deliver an immersion. Okay, but the world wasn't ready for it. All right, that's just how it goes sometimes, right? Same way that a lot of fields of study, fields of philosophy, okay, from religion to technology, science, anything, education, sure. The philosophy behind changing your entire view, restructuring an entire archaeological field based off of one unknown is a little hard to do, a little ridiculous, right? Why have hundreds of professors worldwide, thousands of professors worldwide, hundreds of thousands of professors worldwide go and have to rewrite books, go and have to rewrite articles, go and have to repreface topics and hypotheses, right? Because of something that's unsubstantiated, that's roughly claimed, right? Well, put it off. Don't unearth Göbekli Tepe for another 150 years. Not a big deal. Come buy my books, right? There's elements, there's aspects that can correlate and line up to why they would not want an argument to proceed, why they would not want to venture to change a field of study to accommodate new findings, why they would want to keep it centered in a certain direction. While you can approach all aspects of aliens, okay? Very broadly, very generalized, very openly. There's so many elements that can be talked about that you can jump all over the place and never finish. It's such an open-ended conversation as we've sat here now for over an hour. And you might be saying, not talking about anything necessarily relevant or good, and sure, fair enough. But we had a conversation, well, with ourselves, a little bit with you too, Josh. Way to go, good looking out. But we had the conversation of why we should have a conversation. Because it's fascinating stuff, if you have a desire for it to be. But sure, is it hypothetical? Is it not substantiated and rooted in fact? Yeah, absolutely. Nope, no fact to it. Fact of the matter is, it's better off not having it. Because it's when people rely on the only fact that might substantiate an argument that they shut down and stop looking at the other possibilities that could coincide with that fact. Maybe work alongside with it. Maybe add to it. Maybe strengthen it. Without a complete opening up of, the conversation to be had, to be centered around all elements of any aspect of aliens, alien technology, alien science, aliens being aliens to begin with. Not existing. Existing. No one knows. Or they do know. Right? Zorponians know. Hey, Josh? Of course. Battlefield Earth is a great movie. Well, excellent. Absolutely it is. That's because we said so. And because it is. Norse mythology, Greek mythology, it's all very interesting, Josh. If there's one thing we wish that we had studied a little more, it's a little more of the ancient civilizations that were using like the cuneiform tablets and things of that nature, a little more that era. But we focused on a lot of aspects of stuff, and we came across a lot of aspects of stuff. The only thing that's certain, that we are most certain of, being history majors, philosophy minors, is that our entire recorded history is wrong and a lie. And whilst nothing's necessarily rooted in fact that we have to say, that's pretty much a fact. Because Göbekli Tepe. So, no matter how you look at it, how you dissect it, how you want to go about it, we'll re-venture and talk about alien stuff here and there. It's fun to do. We love doing it. We don't believe all of it. We believe some of it. We have our opinions, views, beliefs. We're open-minded to stuff. We're closed-minded to some other stuff. But knowing that, the conversation, having the conversation, is a key component to maybe changing some of that. To maybe opening up about the stuff that we're a little more closed-minded about. To maybe closing our mind to some of the stuff we were a little more open about. If someone can sway our opinion and say that it's inherently worth it to not change the recorded human history and fix it and correct it to accommodate something like Göbekli Tepe, that's thousands of years older than Stonehenge, that's taught in school, but now all this other shit that's older isn't. It's like, hey, forget this early stuff. We already wrote books about this, and Daddy needs a new pair of shoes, so here's the 7th edition at college, and ironically, this copy is $300. Better not get the 6th edition, because if you're looking for page 36, it's on page 34, dumbass. I told you to buy the new copy, the 7th edition, right? Doesn't matter how you look at it, how you shape it up. The conversations are there to be had if they're willing to be had. And with that, we will entertain any ones of questions you may or may not have for us, any Shyzalosophy advice that you may want to elicit to know probably what not to follow or do with your life's and decision-making processes, but maybe, just maybe, might lend a little insight to it. So, if you have an idea for the next show, because whilst we will return to aliens at some point in time or another, if we don't get an idea for one, we're just going to come up with whatever we want. So, guide it now, or forever, get out of here before us, because we're about to dip set. So, if you don't want us to shut the door on you and close your foot in it potentially, maybe pinch your fingers, you're going to want to leave. But we will kick it for just 1 sec for any additional content we need to do. Ancient Greece. Well, yes. We kind of touched on that already, Josh. You're a little behind. We're looking for anything kind of new to stick us. Oh, that's what you want. Is that for the next episode? Ancient Greece? Oh, man. Well, I'm going to need confirmation on that, Josh. That sounds like we'd have to do work and research for that. So we haven't been there. We've been to Italy. No, we haven't been to Greece. We know people have been there. We've eaten Greek foods. That count? Ancient Greece. Man, that would be a great episode, but I feel that our knowledge on it's a little lacking. So if that is what you're wanting the topic to be about, we'll do it, Josh. You know, we do what we're told, but it's not going to be a good episode if we're being honest. You know, we had a heavy focus on other aspects of historical points in history that we studied more. So, we can do it. I mean, we can do an episode on anything, Josh, but if we're being honest, Zorponians should deserve a little better, right? But we're not saying it's a bad idea. We're just not the ones that would execute it well. And we're open-minded to that aspect. What about the life of Buddha? Well, you know shit, Josh. The thing is that you keep naming all this stuff that we're going to have to do work in researching. Don't you have something more blanketed and generic as far as a term or, you know, a thing that we can pass off as an episode that, you know, we don't really need to research or do work? You know, the thing about it is, Josh, is we're not getting paid for this, see? So when we have to do additional work to learn about a topic and we don't just inherently know it off the top of our head, with which we can, you know, pad out an entire episode, sounds like work, Josh, and if there's one thing we don't like to do, it's work. But Life of Buddha's a good one. We can go there, all right? So, you know, we like that one a little better than the ancient Greece thing, but history of food. Well, shit, man, you know, just because we majored in history and minored in philosophy doesn't mean we have to do anything with that degree, okay? No one else uses their college degrees appropriately. Why should we do ours? Now, we get it. You want to know the history of food, but again, the components of it that we would probably want to focus on then is like, you know, the more interesting components, like the bread riots of the South during the Civil War. Did you know that there were a bunch of chicks that showed up at food banks with like fucking, you know, batons and with rolling pins and pitchforks and shit, and fucking were taking over food banks and demanding bread and shit? It was crazy times back then. And these were like, you know, little blips and newspapers and things like that. But yeah, the history of food, why put it off till tomorrow? Let's do it now. Yeah, so we're talking bread riots, we're talking food riots in the South during the Civil War, and it's not done by those that you would think it was done by. That's right. Conscription had come through at the time, taken the menfolk. You have books like those by David Williams, Dr. David Williams, Plain Folk in a Rich Man's War, things like that, that just inherently focus on the fact that there were conscriptions that went around and drafts that went around that pulled the menfolk from areas unwillingly that they wanted to. Okay, now for some it was a matter of pride. For others it was a matter of waiting until that conscription happened. But there is a very, very huge sentiment of resentment amongst the common folk at the time, as portrayed in, you know, that book and a couple other, that you have elements of them that are so disdained and have such a distaste for the richer populace, okay, your actual plantation owners, your actual slave holders, things of that nature, okay, that actually would pay for them to not have to go and serve in the Confederate Army, for their kids to not have to go and serve in the Confederate Army. They would pay off whoever the conscripting officers were, whoever you needed to pay in order to get out of military service. The other folks, on the other hand, the poor people who didn't own slaves, who were conscripted, who were forced into military servitude for the Confederacy, who had nothing to do with the war or the choosing to go to war or any, real skin in the game aside from the fact that they were told that they have to go and that, in essence, their native homeland was being invaded by these Yankee bastards up north, okay? You had all these menfolk that were taken and carted out of the cities, and then all of a sudden you had hunger set in. As the fields weren't being worked, as food was being diverted to other places, as conscription services were coming around to the farms that were in operation and deboing all the damn food to send to the army, to send to the military, leaving the people with nothing. It's like the grasshopper and the ants. Grasshoppers come rolling through. Thanks for the food, bitches. See you later. Well, it leaves all the women starving. Their kids starving. The men are off in battle, in war. They have no means to track down and get any food. So, lo and behold, they go and riot for it. In the South, you had women organize and get together and go to these little food banks and establishments where they were hauling off all of this food that they were taking from farms and local, business ventures and things of that nature and conscripting that shit and, calling it a tax for the Confederacy. Yeah, these women go down there with their rolling pins. Give us our shit back, bitches! It's time to bake! And they did. And it got reported on in a couple papers, but it's a blip in history, right? The history of food. People wanting it. Government entities taking it unfairly, unjustly. Many components. You want to talk about George Washington Carver studying peanuts? Inventing many components of peanut butter and how it grows? Smart individual. There's lots of elements of the history of food. We can start all over the place. You can even do a recent history as far as the new fusion flavors that have been brought about via the commercialization of the professions of culinariness, right? You can phrase that and clean it up way better. And, it's just our first thoughts on it. We could. We're not going to, though. So you got your culinariness, right? That in pop culture has segued and become fusions of flavors that would have probably never paired up should Chef Gordon Ramsay have never decided to make a show called Hell's Kitchen and tell these assholes, make me something out of this bullshit I gave you, right? And they're like, well, shit, Chef, I used the Asian flavors you put on this table and that fucking squid shit from Japan over there, and voila! Okay, so that's a bad example because those have already been married flavor-wise. But the point is that, these individuals then invent these culinary things that become a part of modern stuff. You can go to cities now, we know that we have recently, and see billboards that advertise fusion flavors between entity A and entity B. Those are different entities, Josh, if we're being honest. Just to let you know. You have elements of it, all right, that became a part of culture, where people began looking for the next fusion pairing to put out. And that's just in modern times. So, fantastic topic. We love talking about the history of food. Yeah, we could blanketly talk about that and pick and choose random stories all night, Josh. Great job. We'll probably still do the history of food. That could be a multi-parter too. But if we're being honest, Josh, we're probably going to not have a lot more stories to tell about food, but who knows? Let's talk about the history of food like the book Fast Food Nation by Eric Schlosser. This dude goes into a history of the food industry in that book that if you want to kind of dive into that is really an interesting read and an interesting, thing, because it talks about components of franchises and the elements of the more popular restaurant industries and chains that had been around for, at this point, decades and decades, that are namesakes. Your Taco Bells, your Subways, your McDonald's and the Burger King of the Wendy's, right? All of those huge or massive entities he talks about in Fast Food Nation. Eric Schlosser, we probably aren't saying that right. We're professional celebrities, obviously, but we're the crappy bad ones. So our pronunciation isn't always right. Our stories just kind of point you in the direction you're supposed to go, Josh. But Eric Schlosser, Fast Food Nation, you got to figure out how to spell it yourself, Josh. We didn't say we were, Aquila and the Bee here, okay? She can spell. We can't. But what we can't do is pad stuff out and talk about it when we know something about it. So, fantastic topic, Josh. Let's see if you've added anything else pertinent that we overlooked ourselves. Civil War would be a good topic. Well, damn it, Josh, we're talking about food now. History of food. Which is it? You want the Civil War or you want that? Believe it or not, the Civil War, we studied that one a lot. We could probably do an episode on the Civil War and do okay. Okay? We could approach that from a variety of directions, a variety of ways, and inherently have a great time with it, man. We love that period of history. It was one of our favorites. Major point of study in our, collegiate career, we'll call it. But yes, Civil War would it'd be an excellent topic. Yeah, we wish that we were always more well-versed. We never feel like we're the exact authority, and we're not. But to add to a conversation, to have a conversation with, to maybe assert some conjectures and some, possibilities in the realm of ridiculousness, we entertain all of that. It's terrific to, hone in on those elements, those aspects, and those, additional kind of things that inherently just make it to where you're having a great time with it, to where you're enjoying all of the aspects of what you're studying, what you're reading, what you're doing, this, that, and the other. Fantastic stuff. Pasta originated in China and brought to Italy by Marco Polo. Well, Josh, we're not going to fact check you on that because A, we're not primed to do that, and B, we'll take your word for it. Yeah, excellent. Probably very reasonably could have happened that way, and it very well could have. We're not saying it didn't, Josh. We're just saying for, all ones of our fan, hi, Mom, that we're not going to intentionally mislead her and say that, Josh is right all the time, okay? Like we said before, we don't have the budgets of the Joe of the Rogans, of the Tim of the Pools, right? So we can't fact check you, Josh, but sure. China brought pasta there. Marco Polo brought it there. We're not one to argue with you about that, Josh. He probably did. He brought all sorts of stuff places, probably. Mainly himself, everywhere he went. We hear people calling him all the time at swimming pools, and we are always looking for that bastard, but can never find him. It's like everywhere they're looking for him. Marco Polo. Fish out of water. Right? I don't know. Don't worry about it. Anyhow, One Piece content. Well, fantastic. Robert, you want One Piece content? We'll give you One Piece content. How about the history of food in One Piece? You have elements of One Piece that have originated over the course of seasons and episodes and movies and video games and merchandise, right? You have components and elements of One Piece's food history that really turned and became in stride the minute they got Sanji to be the chef on the ship, right? And you might be saying, like, no, it's like right before they went to the Baratier, right? It was when they were loading up on any of the things that villagers would give them for doing a great deed, for saving the city, for saving the town, for saving a little girl that nearly drowned. Now, that might not have been an episode, but it's beside the point, Robert. Can we call you Robert? Of course we can. We can do whatever we want. It's our show. So, Robert, the thing about Sanji is that when he inherently officially joined the crew, okay, when The Baratier was saved. That's probably the restaurant, that floating one, you know, where they got him from. When he officially joined the crew, when he officially began his culinary greatness, that's really when the history of food took off in that show. And you might be saying, you know, Monkey D. Luffy was consistently a big eater. He's hungry all the time. Okay, you can't hit gear 2 without hitting gear lunch, right? And if you go to gear 3, you better have had dinner as well. All right? The point is, Robert, we can call you Robert, right? Well, of course we can. All right, Robs. So, when Sanji joined the crew and started dishing out all of the culinary greatness, that's when the history of food took off. Now, you go a couple seasons later, okay, and you have aspects of, you know, some of the 7 warlords will say that snake lady, right? You probably know her name. We probably do too. Eludes us right now, but, you know, we have a lot of other information in the head right now, you know, talking about the history of stuff. Josh was making us talk about Zeporians and stuff like that. And while we're pretty much experts on them, Robs, there's components of them that even we still don't understand. Like why they made us president of their entire world. But, in hindsight, we know why they did. Because we're really the best fit and best option for them at the time. You know, whilst here on Earth, the material we present is a little lackluster, right? In Zaporia, they don't really make their own content, so anything's good. You could draw a line in the dirt, and 15 of them will stand around it and kind of look at it for like 3 days. 2 of them would die because they'd stop eating. And then eventually, you'd be lucky if like a windstorm came and eroded the line, and they're like, oh shit. It's almost like if you put a chicken in front of a line. You ever see this? Of course you have, Robs. You probably do it all the time. If you look up the videos, put a chicken down right in front of the ground. Draw a line from his beak straight out. That bastard falls over like fucking confused as shit. It's the funniest damn thing. Now, we're not saying that you should do that to chickens or that it's ethical or right to do, and we're not saying we ever did it, because we haven't. But there's videos out there of those that do it, and those little bastards fall right over. Funniest damn thing. Unless you don't find humor in it, in which case that's not funny, and you shouldn't do it. But what we can do is, check this out. Sanji food slaps. It absolutely does. Slaps Luffy right in the face so that he can go kick some ass. And if there's one thing that Luffy does, it's kick ass. Because if he didn't, the show would suck. There's even some episodes where they borderline make him not kick ass, just to add a little suck because it's so great otherwise. But the point is, Robs, we can call you Robs, right? Of course. So, Robert, when Sanji started going and making food, that was one point of it, right? But then you have the 7 warlord snake lady, right? That packed that big-ass backpack for Luffy when he was rejoining the crew after the 2-year hiatus, after the War of the Greats, when Ace, spoiler, met his demise. Lost a lot of pirates in that battle. Luffy, arguably, was never the same. But that's beside the point. You have Snake Lady. Okay, I know you know her name, too. Waiting on you, Robert. What's that lady's name? Starts with like an M or something. Like Monica or Mona. What the hell? The one that wants to marry Luffy. You know, that one. Snake Lady. Alright, thanks. The one that snuck him into the prison. You know, geez. Whatever. That lady, Snake Lady, right? Packs Luffy a bunch of food. And she claims it's all his favorites. So, while Sanji's food might slap... Hancock! Ha! Tell me we got it before you. We absolutely did. Hancock knows what Luffy wants as well, food-wise. That's how important the food is in the series. You might be saying, I couldn't remember Hancock's name. That's because we obviously know more about it than you do, Robert. And you might be saying, bullshit, we probably told you to watch it. And you'd be right, but you'd also be wrong. Because it just is. So, anyhow, yeah, you got Hancock in there, but we said it first. We win. And we always do, usually. And in this case, we did. So, yeah. Favorite character. Gonna kill me. Hancock is, huh? Yeah. Fantastic. Well, looks like Sarah's gonna not be happy with you then, because we had to do your remembering for you. And if there's one thing that we would say, it's that. Sarah, go easy on him. He was busy talking about slapping Sanji. I guess he doesn't like him either. Says his food sucks. I mean slaps. Sorry, that's wrong. We thought you said it sucks. But it is indeed slaps, and we had already read it to say slaps. We were just thinking that maybe you could get in trouble twice. And if someone else besides us is getting in trouble, makes us feel better about ourselves. Because, believe you me, for some reason the feds like to follow up on all sorts of stuff. And they shouldn't. But they do. That's beside the point. One Piece and the history of the food of One Piece cannot be talked about without a little old island called whatever that one island was called that has the salt that Sanji collected from the rooftops because the storm comes through and the water dries off of the ocean that hits the tops of the buildings, and the water evaporates, leaving behind the salt that has such a magnificent flavor to it, to savor, that Sanji collected bags and bags full. Only problem with the lineage of the show is that's when they were on the Goings Merry, right? That was before the Sunny, or whatever the other boat's called that they're on, okay? So where'd that salt go? In the 2 years that passed, did Sanji's cooking arguably get worse because he no longer had that special salt that was such a difference maker that he had to learn, hey old man, how did you make such this wonderful dish? Well, it was the special salt gathered from the dirty rooftops after evaporated ocean fish water evaporated. Delicious! And Sanji got it. But where did it go? Guess we'll never know. Maybe it's just glossed over and the show wants to pretend like we don't remember it exists. But looks like we do, show. Looks like we do. That could be a problem if it were a point of contention for anyone. But it's not, so you look out this time, One Piece creators. Let's see. Water 7. Well, One Piece is best for anti-fed. Well, excellent. Good to know. We'll have to play it more often. When in doubt, clear your cache and put on One Piece. Send that info. Water 7. Well, it could have been Water 7, if that's the name of the island. But, in all honesty, we don't know, because they go to a lot of islands. And if we kept up with all that information, we wouldn't have been able to talk about those bread riots that happened between all those women in the South during the Civil War that went and demanded their food back and had pretty much riots to get it. So, while, yes, the One Piece stuff is a little more interesting, we gotta save room for all the other crap, so, that's how it works. Covers so many fan questions. Well, we're just gonna say that we cover so many fans' questions, and that's because we do. You might be saying, well, where's your fan? Don't worry about that. They show up on occasion. But Obviously, we cover all the fan questions because if we didn't, we would have less content. And if there's one thing that we kind of need, it's more content. And by more content, we really just mean the views. So that's why we highly encourage everyone to go to the channel, and click on one of our longer videos, mute it, and go to bed. Or click on one of our longer videos, mute it, and go to work. We get the view. You don't have to watch it. It's a win-win. So, there's components, there's elements to One Piece's food, to the history of food, to ancient Greece, to Oda. We forget that character island. But if there's one thing that we do still need, it's to kind of finalize a topic for next show, and it looks like you're wanting One Piece, so it might be One Piece. We might have to go with that. Oda covers such interesting content in the SBS at the end of Jumps. Well, excellent. Oda is the One Piece author. Excellent! Well, it's a good thing that we pointed that out for you, Robert, because if you didn't know Oda was the One Piece author, you do now. You might be saying, whatever we told you, and, let's look back how that Hancock thing went down, Robert. From what I remember, I'm pretty sure we told you first, so while you might have been saying Oda this, Oda that, in the comments, you weren't talking about the author of One Piece. You were talking about Oda have to remember who Hancock was. And then we were like, oh shit, you spelled Ode to wrong, and then we remembered Oda. You're lucky you added that other part about the being, the One Piece author, or else you would have been way off. And believe you me, that would have been embarrassing for you, Robert. But if there's one thing that we do, it's stick our neck out to make you look better. And if there's one thing we did, Robert, sorry to make you look better, because you really dropped the ball on that Hancock thing, if we're being honest, and we could sit back and talk all night about who dropped the ball on what part of the stream, who didn't answer what correctly, who didn't have the information of who did what to what franchise or series, okay? We're not going to point fingers, Robert, at the fact that you dropped that Hancock name over and over again way after the fact that we got it, okay? Whether you're a slow typer, whether, you were eating a snack at the time and, were using one hand to type and you're actually a fast typer, it's beside the point. There's elements that, just need to be worked in, and that's our point. Is that we have to work them in and make you look a lot better. So, you're welcome that we did that. Excellent. Oda to Boa. Absolutely Oda to Boa. And that's either their name or their nickname. So, it's a good thing that you knew that as well. But, we'll definitely, looks like One Piece is going to be the next one, as long as Josh is okay with it. I mean, Josh did say the history of food and, he wanted ancient Greece, but let's be honest, boy, would that episode not be good if we did it. Like, it would be okay because we would change the topic really fast and not talk about ancient Greece, but that wouldn't be fair to you, Josh. That's why we had to be straightforward and honest with you from the get-go. We're not the channel to do an episode on that, at least not yet. Not now. Maybe one day. Maybe we watch a documentary on it or something and feel comfortable padding something out. That's whatever, right? But that's neither here nor there. New live-action season coming up. That is what got us into One Piece to begin with. Robert, if we're being honest, that live-action One Piece Netflix series made us fall in love with the entire intellectual property, with the entire aspect of every element of the crew, learning the different elements of what can and cannot be in the rules and the structure and the dynamics of the One Piece universe. Fantastic stuff. Excellently written. We think that there's arguably some great philosophical tie-ins with ancient stories and cultures and ancient beliefs of sorts. Okay? You look at like the episodes even when they go to Fishman Island, right? Deep under the sea. And you have giant trees, right? We were talking earlier in the, alien talk. Look at petrified trees. Look at petrified forests. Look at old, ancient, grandiose beings. Your giant sloths, your woolly of the mammoths, your whatever, okay? You had these oversized, massive mammals, these oversized, massive structures, beasts, whatever, oversized, trees, things of that nature. One Piece, when they go to Fishman Island, they comment and mention how those trees are so big that the roots to them and the, entire trunk reaches all the way down to the ocean floor. And they're pretty deep. They even had to put that little bubble coating around their ship to get there. The point is that there's a lot of tie-ins with some philosophical debate, some historical debate. There's even, when they go and fight the gods on that one sky island or whatever, right? There's that iteration of a god that goes around that they fight with or, have their issues with and then end up teaming up with, whatever. We don't remember his name. But there's elements and components to that show that are going to make a fantastic episode. So it's excellent. We'll say that Josh is definitely all about it because why wouldn't he be? He already mentioned about a great arc. The new season coming up, it sounds like we got our episode. Next episode, One Piece. Courtesy of Robert and Josh. We'll call you Rosh. Okay? Talk about an epic team-up. Talk about one of those food fusions that we mentioned earlier. Pop culture created, brought into existence, right? Thanks, Chef of the Gordon of the Ramsay, for having your contestants have to put together a bunch of crap. Because in doing so, you made people want to do that in general. So now you got fusion this, fusion that. Fusion food for your face to attack. Yum, yum, yum. Well, gotta watch One Piece fan later. Amazing episode. Well, we don't know the names of the episodes, but if there's one thing that we do, it's watch them. And we're trying to get through the series, so hopefully we will see that episode and or we'll see it soon. And as long as one of those happens and it's a good episode, we'll like it. Sad to say, only watched One Piece up to the point Luffy's brother shows up. Well, you know what, Josh? It's a long-ass show. It sounds like you were with it for a minute. I would find nothing wrong with any aspect of that. We take our hiatuses for sure. It's a long show. Huge learning curve. And, like we said, the only reason we started watching the intellectual property that is the anime is because we fell in love with the live-action series, and we wanted more. We wanted so much more that we dove into an anime cartoon, genre we don't necessarily follow. A cartoon we never thought we'd want to watch. And we fell in utter love with it and can't get enough of it. What an amazing universe. There's components, aspects we don't dig, don't like. There's elements of maybe some character traits that we don't dig or like. But holy moly ravioli, if they don't convey and portray and paint stuff in random fun lights here and there, okay? If they aren't consistent as all hell, which is massive in the continuity of any show, the consistency is through the roof. The character habits and traits are ridiculously amazing. You look at Roanora Zororo, okay? And his inherent ability to get lost repetitiously just by turning around in a circle. Comedic gold. And by comedic gold, it's good writing. It's consistent writing. There are elements and aspects to it that are so ridiculously funny that it is ridiculously funny and the most perfect the writing could be. Look at the episodes where they're fighting whoever, right? They're always fighting someone, even amongst themselves. that Straw Hat Crew's crazy. That's why we're going to join it. But you have, two divergent paths off of one path, okay? And they're right next to each other. One of them goes up to where you need to go, and the other one's fuck all the wrong direction, okay? Everyone starts running where they need to go, and by everyone, I think it's like just Sanji and Roro that are running at the same time, okay? We can be a little wrong. It's been a while since we've seen this episode. They're going at the same time, and of course, because Roro gets lost everywhere, that asshole went on the wrong path and ran the wrong direction when it was a one track. There's one path you could run on, and the dude got lost. The writing is so clever, the consistency is so insane, that it absolutely is due and worthy to be an entire episode, and it shall be. Yeah, that's enough to know you're not into it. Not for everyone, for sure. Oh, okay, well, maybe Luffy's brother shows up earlier, but, Josh, if it's not for you, that's okay. You don't have to like One Piece. Just hijack the chat room and, we'll change the entire episode that we're doing on One Piece to something else. We're okay with that. We sell out in a heartbeat. Because if we didn't do it, someone else would. So, might as well be us. And, you might be saying, wish it wasn't. And, well, sure, lots of people feel that way. But, that's the thing, Josh. Nothing we can do about it now. We already called dibs. A Daryl Dixon style. So, it's settled. One Piece is enough. Josh probably doesn't like One Piece, but maybe he'll give it another try. And, Josh, have you seen the live action? That's our favorite one. We love the live action. An anime, a cartoon, it's an anime cartoon. We desired to go through it and watch it because we love the intellectual property. We love the universe. There are aspects, elements we don't dig or like. There are characters that we don't like or appreciate or dig. But the show as a whole kept us enough engaged-wise to where we appreciate components and elements of it being around. So, fantastic stuff. We enjoy it. Maybe check the live action out if you haven't. Liked it, just couldn't find it other than on Netflix. They don't have them all. Yeah, so there's definitely issues as far as the timeline of all that. Unfortunately, our knowledge base on it isn't enough. We just kind of watch what's there. And Xbox of the Game Passes gave out a season once upon a time, so it was easy to catch that first season. Yeah, we get it. Might not be the easiest thing to track down and watch, but you might want to start getting some buddies that got the Netflix if you want to check out that live action, because Robert says that new one's coming out. New season, and holy shit, it better, because Netflix has been dropping a lot of bullshit. Otherwise known as crap. It's like they hired us, only we're not getting paid for it. And believe you me, they're not paying anyone else for the crap they're dropping either. They're porting it regionally from other areas they already paid some asshole to make. So, you're getting crap and giving them money. They added commercials, and they're getting money from those assholes too. So, you're getting double crap. You're getting crappy commercials and crappy content. It's like you're watching this, and we don't even get the view or paid for it. Well, there you go. That's life, right? That's the world. Thanks, Netflix. Crunchyroll has all the episodes. Anime is new for being profitable in U.S. as Netflix is making its way. Absolutely. You look beyond Netflix. Look at how all of these streaming services are cashing in on their animated material. Pushing the boundaries on stuff. You got Hulu that rolled out shows like, was it, some of those shows, animated ones, more adult in nature. Maybe not Disenchanted, that's probably Netflix one, but, they had one of them or two of them, the one with the, I don't know, a bunch of them. There's a variety of iterations too, obviously, back to Netflix. They got their animes they've rolled out and stuff. Their Castlevanias, their, Witchers, their, that Cyberpunk series. That was a good anime that came out. Okay? You got Amazon of the Primuses. They've got some random animes that they've made. All right, yeah, obviously the the Hulu stuff like that. Some of them might be a little more cartoon geared and maybe arguably not anime in nature, but inherently they keep bringing them to their services because there's a drive for them to be there. We can't say that we haven't searched anime on a variety of streaming services just to kind of check out what's there, to see what's available. Okay, not necessarily to watch, but when you're kind of checking out what a service has on it, even if you're not searching it out directly and you see their categories, you scroll through a couple videos to see what's there. A lot of these streaming services and entities began rolling out all of the different components of, animation, anime, and stuff like that to their service, as well as creating their own intellectual properties to do such. So good stuff. Yeah, Crunchyroll. Good to know. They got it all. Like G.I. Joe. Unless they don't have G.I. Joe and it's not on there, in which case, that's not where you're going to want to watch it. But, alright, it's settled. Next episode will be about One Piece. Excellent. We won't have to do any additional work on that. We'll just, pretty much wing it. I mean, we're going to dedicate a lot of time to it. But we are at the point in the episode where we do need to apologize for last stream. So, sorry about that. Excellent. So, going forward, you'd think we'd save the time next stream by apologizing for this stream now, but seems not right. Seems like every stream just kind of needs its own apology time, right? Well, we already apologized for the last one, and this one you're just going to have to suck up and live with till we apologize for it later. But if you want to get out of here before us, now's your chance. We're about to turn off the lights and shut the door, so if your fingers are in it, they're about to get pinched. Believe you me, you don't want your fingers pinched in the door. So, you might want to get out of here. But, remember, all of that standing around here doing on our grass is really starting to mush it down and make it not look good. So, we don't need your subscription, we want your money. Downvote the shit out of this and give us a buck. Get off our lawn!